Well, good afternoon, everyone. It's 3 o'clock in Miami, and it is noon where I am. In any case, I had a special request today to discuss 9/11, so I thought I'd go ahead and do that. I see that there's no one on here yet, which is fine. There we go. There's one viewer. I don't expect a huge turnout, but this is a monumental day, a very important day. There's only a few days in our lives where we have a moment that changes everything. We have them in our personal lives, for sure, and we have them in the national landscape. And this was one day that certainly changed the national landscape as we knew it. I find it fascinating that the students that I have nowadays, where many of you were not actually born when 9/11 took place, and if you were born, it ends up you were very young, probably not even in school yet. And I can tell you that as a person who's 54 years old, I was, 35 years old when it took place. And I'm just going to kind of play back for you what 9/11 was like and then give you some interpretations of it, because life as we know it is vastly different. But you wouldn't know that because you were born in a more recent period. You know, when I was born in 1966, it was hard to understand the impact of the Depression. It was hard to understand the impact of, World War II on everyone's life. Kristen, Andy, hello. So, as an aging person, Nicole, Raydell, hello, sir. As an aging person, I find myself being what we used to call, hello, Amanda, an old head. And old heads, as it turns out, end up being tremendous storytellers. I'm writing a book right now called Hope Works. And as you know, the YouTube channel that you're on right now is Hope Works with Sean Schwanner. I wrote an actual chapter last night about my advisor, Len Jordan, who, after I had graduated, he's the one that taught me how to write. He's the one that taught me how to think conceptually like a sociologist. And my life with him was very much a father-son type of situation. He looked like Santa Claus. He's 5'4". Alexis, how are you? He's about 5'4", little round guy, had a white beard, white curly hair, the nose, and he looked like Santa. And he came in, and while he was, he introduced himself, and I said, man, that guy looks like Santa Claus. And within the next 2 years, he had become probably my best friend. And the one thing that he always mentioned was that how, as you get older, you become a historical landmark. And I reflect on it, and he was actually younger when I took him as a student than I am now, which is like amazing. But in that story, I remember I had gone back to visit him at Denison, and I had been teaching at Ohio State by this point for, 4 years, and I was very creative. Those of you who haven't had, hello Nicholas, those of you who haven't had me in a live class, you would see a vast difference with what I am live versus on a YouTube, live stream. But I went back, and we ate ice cream. We had an ice cream cone, and he had told me that I was the best teacher he had ever met at that point in time. And he told me while we were eating that it was going to be the last time I'll ever see him because he had cancer and he was going to pass away. Hello, Jessica. And I can remember, Isabella, Janine. Hi, everybody. Thank you for joining in. And he told me I was the best teacher he had ever seen, and I was sharing some of the things I do in class. Hey, Ashley. And he shared a lot of things that he had done in his classes. And, at the end of it, he said, I love you like a son. I said, you changed my life forever, Len, and I'll never forget you. So when you get my classes, you're actually getting a lot of Len Jordan. And I waved to him, and it was the last time I ever saw him because he died about a week later. And in my book that I'm writing, hey, Ashley Perez, one of the things I notice is that in our lifetime, there are moments, right? We don't remember the dates. We don't remember years. We remember moments that happen. Hello, Janine. Oh, that's okay. That's okay. Don't worry about it. You're good. We remember these moments. Remember the moment our child was born. Remember the moment we got married, maybe divorced. But we remember moments. And, even though it was a sad event, I remember waving to him. And as I got in my car and drove towards the sundown, towards the dusk, I remember I had a tear in my eye. And I was smiling because I'd had one of the few perfect moments of my life, right? Here's the person who transformed me, and he's the one that made me a professor. Well, 9/11 was an imperfect moment. And I can tell you, I remember it as if it was yesterday. It was 19 years ago today that it took place. And at that time, let me tell you how the world was different. Always outdoors. Hello, April. The Michael. Good afternoon. Let me tell you how different life was back then. At that point, we had just had the dot-com explosion, where the stock market had expanded like this. It had gone straight up, and then all of a sudden it crashed, and people lost everything. People lost their entire retirements. People lost, everything they had saved. I was fortunate enough that I saw the crash coming, and I put everything in cash and managed to catch everything on the downslope. And when it came back up, I made a lot of money. But I was lucky because I had an intuition about it. So .com was just starting. The internet was brand new. Gaming really didn't exist. People were still going outside to play basketball. They were still riding bikes. They were still playing football at the playground. And parents weren't necessarily watching their kids. They're saying, go off and do what you want to do. Just be home by dark. And at that time, that day on 9/11, I had just bought my first cell phone because, Macy was newborn. She was less than 1 year old. Maybe she was 1 year. No, she wasn't. No, she was one, about to turn two. So my wife at the time wanted me to have a cell phone. So I had one of those freaking flip phones, and I'm walking across campus. And so just in case she needed me for something with our daughter. So in any case, I'll never forget that morning. Oh my God. It was Kentucky. I was in Louisville, Kentucky. And it was a beautiful blue sky. The sun was coming down. It was a Tuesday and big football game coming up on Saturday. And my class used to meet at 9 o'clock. And so I used to walk to school. Ashley Lego says, hey, Brian, as you know, I don't like having a car. I like to walk. And my office was literally 1 mile away from my home. So I was eating breakfast, and I remember watching NBC, which was Matt Lauer and Katie Couric. And they were I forget who they were interviewing. They were interviewing somebody. But all of a sudden, I remember Matt Lauer saying, hey, Chris. Matt Lauer was saying, we have to go to a commercial break. There's a fire at the World Trade Center, and we hear that a small private plane has crashed into the side of the World Trade Center. When we come back from commercial breaks, we'll tell you what happened. Hello, Nicholas. And when they came back, it was very unclear as to what was happening. And all I remember is in 1993, 92, I took a class on the sociology of deviant sexual behavior. Interesting, right? With a guy who used to work at the Kinsey Research Institute. As a matter of fact, he is portrayed in the movie Kinsey. Hey, Carla. So while I'm watching this, I'm thinking to myself, this seems like it was a terrorist act. Hello, Roxana. This is a terrorist act that he had warned us about in class. He said, we worry about sexual deviance, which is a big topic back in the early 90s. We worry about street gangs. Hey, Genesis, good seeing you. Genesis, I need to talk to you for a second afterwards. And he was saying, 93 hadn't happened yet where they tried to blow up the World Trade Center from the basement. So what many of you don't know is a terrorist act group tried to blow up the World Trade Center by planting bombs in the basement in the parking garage in 1993. 6 people died. It wasn't like the 3,000 who died on 9/11, 2001. Hey, Melanie. And so what happened was he said that one day we worry about street crime. There will be one hit somewhere where it'll be so catastrophic that the news won't be able to handle it. And so while Matt Lauer and Katie Couric are discussing, hello, Jessica, let's see here. Let me see, let me move this over here. We'll talk about the group chat in a little bit, okay? That's a fair question. There is one for one of the classes, but maybe not for the other one. So in any case, when the plane hit, the first recollection I had was, I believe that this is a terrorist attack. And so they flip back to the news, and at this time, they start getting live coverage about 20 minutes in. About 20 minutes into the news segment, they start showing the helicopters flowing overhead. Okay? And as the helicopters are flowing overhead, the side angle, all you could see was smoke. And you could see people on the rooftop doing like this. So we knew something was going on. And the helicopters could not come down to save the people who were on the rooftop of the World Trade Center because the smoke was so thick that if they tried to lower it, they were afraid they were going to crash. And by this point, hello, Alexis. By this point, no one knows what's going on. So I have to teach class at 9:30. by the time I left, or 9 o'clock, I left at about 8:25, and at that point they said it had been a commuter plane that had hit the side of the World Trade Center, building number 1, I believe it was. So I'm walking to school. And while I'm walking, Gretchen calls me. She calls me on the cell phone. I flip it up. You know, it's not like the smartphone I have now. It's a flip up. And I answer, and she said, "Hey, you're not going to believe this." I said, "What's that?" She goes, "My mom was watching the news, and a second plane hit the other World Trade Center building." At then, I was absolutely sure that it was a terrorist attack. So I go inside my classroom, which was in Davidson Hall at the University of Louisville. And in that class, I had 3 basketball players who were Final Four contestants for the University of Louisville Cardinals. And I had 18 other students. And this is when BlackBerries had first come out. And what happened, we're in class, and as we're in class, you know, people are typing, trying to figure out what's going on with the news. And it was established by Matt Lauer and all the channels that it was in fact a terrorist attack. And then at this point in time, they were announcing that another plane was heading towards Washington, D.C., and sure enough, it hit the Pentagon. And now, literally, my students are petrified because University of Louisville, was just 1 mile away from a local airport, from Standiford Field, which was the airport, the international airport at Louisville. And so we hear the planes coming in, and we're watching the people BlackBerry. And we start to get the students in the classroom who are crying, literally crying, and they're trembling. And at that point, another plane, they're announcing that there's another plane heading towards the White House. It had flown over Cleveland and is now heading over Pennsylvania towards the White House. And of course, hello Melanie, that one had crashed in central Pennsylvania. So in this class period, about this time, about 9:30 or so, all of a sudden now, it was crazy. You start hearing all the planes, because they on the news they had said all jets in the airspace of the United States of America have to land at the most local airport that they can find. And with us being a mile away, the planes, you could look out the window and the jets were just barely scraping over the campus, and they were so low that in fact our building was shaking. And I can remember one of our Final Four starting forward for the Cardinals, he jumped under a desk and took cover. And he said, "Man, I can't stay here. I gotta go." So he runs out. He said, "I gotta go find my girlfriend," you know, things like that. And the other one said, "Man, I gotta go too. I'm scared." And here you got these big guys, 6'10", 6'11", running out scared. Now people are crying. Then we have people in the hallway who are knocking on my door. "Can we come in?" Because we're afraid. So I did an impromptu lecture during that particular class. And as I was lecturing, I mean, it was surreal. You can't even imagine what it was like, right? So it's surreal. All the planes are shaking the campus. And in that moment, World Trade Center number 1 collapsed. And it comes down to the ground. And I'm like, oh my God. So it's about 10 o'clock in the morning. Class is about ready to get out. And people are coming in trying to seek refuge. And I'm discussing how, you know, the International Division of Labor, how capitalism, the competitive nature of the global economy is bringing people into conflict. And if you watched the live stream yesterday, or even if you watched it as a tape recording, what we really saw on 9/11, and it's really complicated, much more complicated than how it was portrayed then, but what we really saw was hatred that was built upon common sense, right? So if you're American at that point in time, persons who came from the Middle East were regarded as our enemies, because we're still reeling from conflicts that we had with Iran and all the stereotypes that play in with Middle Easterners. Now all of a sudden people are like, oh my God, those people over there. But at the same time, you have those persons looking at the imperialist nation as the ones who are exploiting the country for oil and stuff like that. So on the one hand, we're looking at it from the perspective that they're terrorists. On the other hand, they're looking at us as if we're terrorists. And this common sense perception was drilled into the very culture and the fabric that both societies lived in. So what you had was this hatred that was a two-way direction based upon things that were arbitrary, that we didn't even understand as being real, right? For example, we attacked Iraq in the war when the fact is, hey Oscar, when the fact of the matter is that 19 of the 20 persons who were the hijackers were from Saudi Arabia, but Saudi Arabia was an ally of the United States in the region. So we didn't attack Saudi Arabia, we attacked Iraq based upon weapons of mass destruction, you know, we went through this campaign. The Bush administration went through a campaign saying, we know that Iraq is developing weapons of mass destruction, weapons of mass destruction, weapons of mass destruction. And I can tell you this, you see how the pandemic has shut down, hey Cassidy, how the pandemic has shut down football stadiums this weekend, right? Or if they're not shut down, you have 25% capacity. Back then, everyone was petrified. Let me tell you something. You think it's scary to get on a plane right now. I have friends who still won't get on a plane because of 9/11. There were, you know, everything was grounded for a week. The stock market was shut down. Planes were not allowed to go up into the airspace at all for at least 7 days. And the United States economy was slammed. Do you think it's bad now? If you go back to 9/11, we got crushed. Restaurants were closed because you couldn't go anywhere. You weren't allowed to go anywhere. And they were debating, should we even have football on Saturday? And then George Bush was like, you know, you got to go on and live your life as you would, et cetera, et cetera. So you have all these countervailing forces going on, and people were petrified. And we had to find a way somehow to defend the United States. So you have this confluence of structural inequality. You have all kinds of stereotypes going back and forth as to who is the enemy, who is not the enemy. Then you have to develop a rhetoric, and then you have to develop an ideology, and then you have to develop a political system. Hey, Manny, and when all those things are... No, this is not... Hold on. This is not a live stream for 1120. This is impromptu. This is completely arbitrary. No one needs to be here. It's not mandatory at all. The real live streams for classes aren't until next week. Someone invited me to discuss 9/11 today, so that's all I'm doing. I'm putting it into context of common sense and human behavior. But the real live streams come next week. This is just an impromptu conversation to describe to you how the world has changed since that day. So the rhetoric, the ideology that came about at that point in time was the Patriot Act. Okay? With the Patriot Act, now all of a sudden, all the transactions that we're making in the bank are being watched by the federal government, because if now all of a sudden you make a deposit in cash greater than $2,500, then all of a sudden, you know, we equate that with a terrorist sympathizer. Now, recall, because most of you live in Miami, if you take a look at that downtown skyline in Miami, that skyline was built strictly off of, back in the 80s, off of drug money, right? And people would come into the banks with thousands, hundreds of thousands, millions of dollars in cash and deposit it. As a matter of fact, all those auto manufacturers, all those auto dealers up and down Biscayne Boulevard, up and down US 1, they were kept in business off of cash transactions. It was a beautiful way of laundering money. Okay, so all of Miami was built off of money laundering. Now, if you tried to go into a bank with more than $2,500 in cash, you were under scrutiny. If you came in with $10,000, you underwent federal investigation. So the interesting thing that happened, and you wouldn't realize this because you weren't alive back then, prior to between 1984 and 1999, right? Between that period of time, when I was in high school in 1984, it was my senior year, we read the book 1984 by George Orwell. And what they talked about was Big Brother, right? Watching all of your moves and everything else. And we feared having the government and having corporate entities tell us what to think, how to think, and permitting them to watch all of our behavior. We were petrified of it, because in those days, we were like, oh my gosh, no, we can't have an intrusion into our personal life, our private life, right? And I remember 1984. It was crazy. Everyone was paranoid, and nothing really happened. Fast forward to 2001, right? Not only did Y2K scare us to death. Y2K, for those of you who don't know what it is, 1999 going into 2000, people were petrified that the computer systems and the software would not turn over into the year 2000, because everything is binary, right? 0101010101, and they didn't program the computers to turn over to the year 2000. So people were afraid to be in the hospital, because if the computer system broke down and they're on respirators, they're going to die. People did not catch a flight that night, because if the computer shut down, there was no way of controlling the planes in the air. People were petrified they're going to lose all their money in the banks, because if the banks stopped working, their money, because it's digital, is gone. So there was all this paranoia, and of course nothing happened in Y2K. The year 2000 came, 1999 left, everything was fine. But this was different, because what happened here is, as George Bush, the administration, tried to develop a justification to go to war, They used it in the ideology of protecting the public and making us safe. So back in the 80s, we wanted our privacy. By 2001, we want our safety. And so what happens now, there's an assignment for one of my classes, I don't know which one. Yeah, no, exactly, Nicole, that's exactly right. Not, Nicole makes a nice statement here. Not all Middle Eastern individuals are alike. Let me tell you something, right? Not anybody's alike, but everyone's alike, okay? If we take a look at what it is to be African American, right? One of the things that drives me crazy is because a person's African American doesn't mean that everyone thinks the same way. There's variation within group. There's variation within the European American group. There's variation within the gay and lesbian group. There's variation within persons who are from the Middle East. There's variation in Asia. There's variation. We tend to see stereotypes make us think in a linear way, that everybody within this category somehow is the same. Well, C. Wright Mills makes it very interesting. We talked about him yesterday, the sociological imagination. One thing that I've learned over time is that there's more variation within group than across group, right? So we like to say that African Americans and European Americans are vastly different because of race. Well, it's not true. Within race, there's a huge variation. Across race, we tend to try to do the same things, right? If you look across race, we try to raise our family. We try to do the best we can for our upbringing. We try to get an education. We try to do the same things. But the belief system varies. So Nicole, you're absolutely right? Is that there's so much variation within group, but why then do we always focus on variation across group? And the reason is because our common sense has been constructed to develop enemies out of people who should be our friends, to create for us strangers out of people who really are not strange. And that's what happened here, right? Because what happened here is everybody got lumped together as one. I had one guy in my class, he also played for the University of Louisville Cardinals. His name was Al-Haji Mohammed. He's the only guy I couldn't beat in horse. I could beat the rest of them, even though they were Division I and all that stuff. I could beat them all. I beat most of them. I never played Reese Gaines, but I couldn't beat Al-Haji Mohammed. Well, I have all these basketball players in class. Cocaine Cowboys, yes. I have all these basketball players in class. I have all these people in class, right? And I have, at that time, my smallest class was 75 people. My classes range from 75 people up to 150. Out of all the people I have in 3 or 4 sections of 75, that's 300 students, he was the only one investigated by the FBI, right? Why? Because his name was Al-Haji Mohammed. In other words, we utilize stereotypes to decide who is the enemy from who is not the enemy. And the fact of the matter was, he was such a straight-laced guy that it made no sense to investigate him at all. And he went on to play professional basketball in Europe. His brother Nazi Mohammed played 14 or 15 years in the NBA, came out of the University of Kentucky, had a great career. But here's what happened. Life as we know it was transformed forever. Now we focus in on safety rather than on privacy. And here's why that's interesting. Because when we take a look at terrorism, right? When we take a look at terrorism, we take a look at this threat from external forces instead of internal forces. External groups instead of internal groups, right? Now, here's why that's important. If terror is to live in fear, which is what a terrorist wants, right? They want you to live in fear so they can control your behavior. On average, in the United States, about 14 people get killed by terrorists per year. In the United States. Now, globally, it might be a little bit more. And I know that there's different types of threats in different types of countries, but those are all locally based. But here, we developed a rhetoric that, well, when we went to fight Iraq, we borrowed $2 trillion from the Social Security Administration, which is going to haunt you all. By the way, you all, as a generation, need to really take very careful consideration of what your long-term saving is going to look like. How are you going to invest for your future? Because there's no guarantee that Social Security is going to be here. As a matter of fact, it'll probably be here for me, but it won't be here for you. Assume it's not going to be here for you. Why? Because George Bush, it's not because of George Bush, but George Bush borrowed $2 trillion from the Social Security Administration to fight a war on terror in the Middle East, or in Iraq, specifically in Afghanistan, right? But it was never paid back. Now, here's what's interesting about that, okay? While we were borrowing that money to fend off 14 homicides in the United States, look what happens. and this is what drives me crazy. Those of you in human behavior, 1191, pay attention to this. Those of you in social environment, whatever number that is, I don't know what number that is, 1120, pay attention to this one, all right? Think about terror, the fear of death, okay? In the United States in a given year, 360 children will die from the hands of their parents and their guardians, right? 14 die from terrorist organizations, okay? 360 die from their parents and guardians. Now, why is that important? Because, see, I'm an expert on violent crime. So when we take a look at children who die at the hands of their family, one, most of them can't talk yet. Most of the kids who die at home, they are under the age of 2. If they can talk, they're just now formulating the ability to have speech. But here's what happens. When a child gets shaken to death, which is how they typically die when they're under the age of 2, they don't get shot, they don't get stabbed, they get shaken, or they get beaten with a blunt object. Typically, that child has experienced that over time. Exactly, it has nothing to do with race. It has to do with a lot of the choices. It has to do with the way we socially construct boundaries and definitions of differences. Now, we take a look at these kids who die, right? These kids who die have no one to call. And typically, by the time they do die, it's the 5th time that they have been shaken. It's the 5th time they've been beaten. It's the 5th time that something of this type has happened. Now, that child who dies, those 360 kids who die, right, they're living in absolute terror. They're living in real terror. And not only do they live in real terror, they have no government to call upon so that they can be protected. 1. 2, we're not spending $2 trillion a year to take care of the kids who are at risk of being brutalized by their parents and guardians. We're not. As a matter of fact, if we took $2 trillion to protect our children from violence within the home, like we did to fight terrorist organizations, do you realize we could change the whole entire infrastructure of our education system? We know that when I was in high school, we were ranked number one of the top 3 education countries for education in the world. Now we're ranked, what, 26 as of 2012, and it may have fallen even further. Why? Because what we're doing is we're training you just to take a multiple choice test. And why is that? Because the more we train you to think like us, those people who have control over the cultural ideology, the political system, the more we train you to think like us, the more you're going to follow what we say. And the more you follow what we say, and you don't do it critically, you don't do it with forethought, guess what happens? The easier it is to manipulate the entire population. Now, we take a look at the pandemic. The pandemic, hey, look, I'm not playing around with it. You see we're doing remote, right? I don't have to teach live until they have sequestered the coronavirus because there's a threat to me because I had these 2 strokes in January and February. They're minor strokes, but nonetheless, I'm high risk. Well, look what's happened, right? We have a nation divided on what? Whether you wear a mask or not? People are fighting each other and shooting each other over whether you should wear a mask? Now, that's about as arbitrary as it gets. The question is, how do we construct out of such an arbitrary thing differences where we can actually hate, right? And here's what I think has happened largely with the coronavirus. While we have been spending so much time trying to protect ourselves and create a world of safety, one of the things that's happened is we became blind followers to leadership. And I believe that one of the things that's happened is that we've become followers of what the government says to do. And I think it was a test run for other things that are coming down the road. Because you got to remember, I didn't have this back in 2000. I had a flip phone, right? I had cable, right? I had a car, but certainly there weren't any games, right? Not the kind of games that you're aware of. Certainly we didn't have the technology you have. And the one thing we did not have was artificial intelligence, right? Artificial intelligence, now look at the trend. I'm not having you look into the trends. In 2001, we created a political ideology that favors safety over privacy, all right? 17, 18, 19, 20 years later, we are doing the same thing except in a different way. Now, every time you send a text message to me asking a bunch of questions, by the way, I'm just kidding. I've received thousands of questions over where do I submit this, what's the format, all that kind of stuff, right? The more you text, the more you say I like this on Facebook or on Instagram or whatever, every time you write a little sentence, every time you do a like, every time you do a heart, every time you do something like that, that is being recorded, right, in a digital economy. So that, and Zuckerberg admitted this last year or 2 years ago in the trials in front of Congress. He said, yeah, we collect the data, and at that time they sold the data. And so every time you put out a digital message, that message is being saved. So if you want privacy, you don't have it, right? Because, okay, here, don't look at my number. Don't look at my number. I'll cover my number. Well, it doesn't matter. There's nothing in it. Okay, so I put this in and I scan it. There's a chip right here, this microchip, that follows all of my digital spending. I don't much carry cash anymore because, first of all, it's too hard to go to the bank and get the withdrawal. It's easier just to carry my card. So now every time I scan it, every time I swipe it, it goes into a digital database somewhere. Every time I hit an ad on Facebook or something like that, every time I hit an ad on Facebook, what happens? It saves my information, right? Have you noticed? It happens to me. Ashley, you know this. Where'd you go, Ashley? Lagos. I can walk into the department, and Ashley works there. Hey, Isaac, what's happening? I can walk in there and say, hey, what's up, Ashley? And all of a sudden, Alexa answers, how can I help you? And I'm like, oh my God. Every time I come in, Alexa's answering. We have this technology that can hear us. We have technology that can follow us. And in 1984, there's no way we would have been happy to have that kind of thing. Yes, I know. And so you have a conversation, and this happens to me all the time. I might have a conversation about, I don't know, a bank loan, or I might have a conversation about I want to switch my phone plans. And I go into Facebook, and all of a sudden I have all these ads saying, here's a new phone plan. Here's a place to go get a loan. Well, that storage, according to, what's his name, Snowden, he says it's being saved. It's being saved because what it's doing is creating for us a profile of who you are. The companies like Facebook and Google, they know more about you than you know yourself. Because what it's called is anticipatory marketing. They anticipate what you're going to want. And then what they can do is they can advertise to what your perceived wants are going to be, and then you go ahead and purchase it. What does that have to do with 9/11? See, 9/11 changed the way in which we conceptualize privacy. And it prepared us for yes, and Kristen, and this is why I focus so much on thinking and critical thought. Because what I'm doing right now, at this very second, is I'm doing for you what is called environmental scanning, right? Okay, and environmental scanning is certainly this. That is, you look at the institutions in front of you. You look at how structural change takes place. And you can start to predict what the future is going to look like. For example, I'm a very good investor in the stock market. By the way, my partner and I have a partner named Annette. We work in financial services together. Starting next Thursday, she and I are going to start producing training segments on how to invest your money, on how to build your financial house. You're going to be welcome. Your parents are going to be welcome. Friends down the street are going to be welcome because I have taken it upon myself to try to educate an entire generation in order to prepare for what the environmental landscape looks like, because the trends are clear, okay? Here's the trends. Let's get down to it, all right? When 9/11 took place in 2001, right, since that day, the average income of the average American, the median income, has decreased by 15%. The average price of goods has gone up 45%. So if prices have gone up like this and income has gone down like this, what does that mean? That means the average American, hello Nicole, is falling further and further behind than their generation before that. Yes, Raydell, I will announce where it's going to happen. I will certainly announce where it's going to happen. So now, each generation is falling further and further behind. On average, between 2010 and 2017, my generation, that's 45 to 54, our average income fell 11% in that time period. Only one group increased, and that was people who were, I think it was 54 and over, or I think 65 and up. Those persons who have the deepest wealth also saw the greatest increase in income. Every other age category has gone down. Now watch this. What does that mean? You all live in Miami, so you understand how expensive it is to rent an apartment on your own. If you want to have control over where you rent, over where you live, you who live in Miami, try to live in Brickell on your own, by yourself. You have to have what? $2,000, $3,000, $4,000 for a one-bedroom apartment in Miami. Who can afford it? So you got to get roommates. Now watch what's happening. If you go to Miami, back when I was in college, I think it was 21% of college graduates lived at home with their parents or came back and lived at home with their parents. Maybe it was 15%, somewhere between 15 and 20. Now, in Miami, 42% of college graduates live at home with their parents. Why? Why? A lot of people like to say, well, the millennial generation, they're lazy, this, and that. It's not that at all. I don't think anyone's lazy. I think we're a part of a system. And as part of that system, you are living in a period where average income is going down. So what does that mean? Older persons, like myself, start to take the jobs, your entry-level jobs that you would have had back in the 70s and the 80s, and we're working them, right? And we're working them for the same pay you would. So there's no place for you to enter into the workforce. Therefore, your average income is lower, your parents' average income is lower, so to make way, people have to stay with their family, right? What does that suggest? It suggests this tremendous economic shift. Now, the other thing that's happening is that now you have the baby boomers who are starting to retire. By the way, I'll tie it all back into 9/11 in a second. Baby boomers are starting to retire, and they're the ones that pull off of Social Security. So you are paying into Social Security, they're using the money. So if you suspect that there's going to be Social Security left when you get this environmental scanning, this is nothing, if you suspect that, then what's going to happen? You may be left with nothing. And we don't know what the system is going to look like 40 years from now when you're heading towards retirement, 50 years when you're heading to retirement. But I do know this. We're not telling you how to invest. We're not telling you how to build your... Well, I wouldn't say that, Charlie. I wouldn't say that. I didn't say that the feminist movement ruined everything. But you got to take a look at the context, right? The context and when the feminist movement arose, and when did it start, right? Did the feminist movement start in 1803 with the temperance movement, which was, where we said you can't drink alcohol, and in the 1800s that was led by women, and women who were trying to protect young kids who were young teenagers who were displaced, who were drinking, mainly Irish persons in Philadelphia, New York, and Boston. That was led by women, and then the women's suffrage movement. All that did was, it gets a bad rap, but the feminist movement was really just questioning the system as it stood. It's no different than any other system that arose, right? So if we take a look at these systems, right? If we take a look at the system, the feminist movement was no different than the civil rights movement, was no different than the gay rights movement, okay? Now, I wouldn't say that. But what I would say, Charlie, is that, like Gloria Steinem, right? She was one of the leaders of the feminist movement. She grew up 3 blocks away from where I did. She became world famous. She was a feminist leader, et cetera, et cetera. But what they did was, I don't know if they ruined everything, but they questioned everything, right? You got to look at the context in which things happen. In the 60s and the 70s, we were questioning the establishment as it stood because it was very exploitative. And so in questioning it, some things happened. It wasn't just a feminist movement. There was also an economic movement, right? Because in World War II, women went to work while the men were fighting war. And so women got a taste of economic independence. So you have that stream going. Then you have this questioning of what do the power structures in society look like in the 60s and the 70s, and the feminist movement rose up. It was a necessary movement. But so are the movements that exist today, protecting the rights of immigrants. And I'm not saying that we're supposed to let them all in or whatever, but what I am saying at a very basic human position is that at a very human position, everyone, in my opinion, has the right to live. And has a right to live in a way, aggregate demand curve, yes, I think that's true too. They have a right to live as human beings, right? Not getting into all that, okay? Those are reflections of a cultural epoch, right? Of a period of time. Just like right now, there's a period of time where we're seeing a counterfuge of cultural expectations. We're seeing conflict on the fray, that is in the margins. But what we're really looking at is a group of people, Americans, groups of people, who are trying to understand what the hell is going on. What is going on? We can't explain why there's so much competition over these scarce economic resources. Yeah, they did, right? Well, yes and no, because I'm referring to Charlie, everyone. You know, what happened is that increasingly back in the 40s and the 50s, you know, one person can be a wage earner and could take care of the whole entire family, and they could live pretty well. You can't even try that now. To have a one wage earner, like for example, I'm in the top 10% of wage earners. I can't carry the whole thing. Not in Miami, I can't. So I have to work part-time. I start my own company. I work for Primerica. You know, I'm writing books. I do all these things to generate enough money so I can carry everything. And my base salary is really better than I ever dreamed it would be, right? What we're really talking about is the structure of the economy, which we'll get into all this stuff later, right? Hey, Sophia. Back to the topic. When we look at the terrorist attacks, we're looking at the same type of situation. There was a confluence of economic competition, right? There was a confluence of ideological competition. There was a change in the global climate starting in after the fall of the Berlin Wall in 1988-89. So you start to see these changes taking place. And when you have changes in hatred, when you have hatred at that level, people will do what they need to do to try to establish their will upon other people. Now 9/11 is curious, right? Because look what happened. When the terrorist attack hit New York City, it was a symbolic attack, which means the attacks were designed to send a message to the population. Symbolic, not economic, right? And if it was a symbolic attack, which I think it was, if you hit the World Trade Center, you hit the strongest monetary center in the world, right? Because New York is the central hub for world economics. If you hit the Pentagon and you hit the White House, now you've hit the political center of the world. So once you hit once you hit the economic center and the political center, you have sent a message that we are here to compete, right? All I'm saying is this. What you really saw was the competition over human nature and whose common sense is going to prevail. Is it going to be a common sense that we're regarded as imperialists, or is it going to be common sense where they are protecting oil interests and we become the enemy? Are they the terrorists or are we the terrorists? It is a philosophical debate, and I'm not saying I'm anti-American. What I'm saying is that if you take a look at it from an ideological perspective, from a common sense perspective, what you're really watching is the alignment of humans in accordance to their perspective. Now, that's the same thing with the current protests, right? Are you pro-police, anti-police? Black lives matter, blue lives matter. It's the same exact type of division. See, human nature, it can be either good, it can be bad, or it can be socially constructed. Because yesterday I talked about Hobbes, right? People are inherently evil, you know, they're greedy, they're out for naked self-interest, versus Rousseau, who says people are inherently good, they're always looking for what's best, they want to be decent people, they want to be cooperative, but they get misled. It could be something in between. It could be that we're neither, and what we look at, what we anticipate, is socially constructed. That is, it doesn't exist until you and I come to an agreement that it does exist. Right? So when it comes into an existence and we believe it exists and we act as if it exists, then it does exist. And then we behave based upon this social construction. For example, in our live class, when I teach live, on the first day, I always come in and I play music, some kind of music, right? Which I should have done here, but it's a little bit different situation, right? And I usually play something like gangster rap. And when I play gangster rap, I just basically ask people a simple question, right? How many of you want to kill me now? So we'll listen to Ice Cube or NWA or something like that. And no one raises their hand. No one wants to kill me, thankfully. And so why is that important? Because our fundamental assumption about human behavior is that we're stimulus response creatures. If you provide the stimulus, people are going to respond. Hi Megan. So when we go ahead in 1989, we banned all gangster rap music from being on the airwaves. Why? Because we blame gangster rap for the surge in urban homicide between 1988 and 1992. When the fact of the matter is, when I play the same gangster rap in the year 2019, nobody wants to attack me. So what that really suggests is that we're not stimulus response creatures where I give you gangster rap, all of a sudden now you want to be violent. That's stimulus response. Is it possible? Is it possible that we're response stimulus? That we, as the response mechanism, can insert ourselves into a social situation and change the stimulus? In other words, is it possible that we as human beings have the ability to reconstruct social order in the way that we understand it? Yeah, well, it is. It is, AC. So if we say that we have the ability to adapt to a contextual environment, that means we're not stimulus response. That means we are interactors within a context that can also help define the situation. We have the ability to construct reality as we see fit. By the way, why is this important? Because if we start to see that we can have an impact on the nature of the context, if we see that you and I can actually redefine the world in which we live, then we can start to define our actions differently. Rather than sitting back and spending our money because, hey, we can go to the club, we can go to the restaurant, we can hang out, we can have Starbucks, we can have whatever. Instead, I say, you know what? I'm going to pay myself 10% every single time I get a paycheck so that when I retire, I'm a millionaire. I can make you all a millionaire. Don't even worry about it. Making you a millionaire is the easiest thing that can happen. The question is, how many of you are going to have the discipline to do it? The second question is, how many are you going to define it as important enough that you would take the necessary steps to do it? Right? That's the question. And that's the question most people... Stocks, maybe. That's one way. Real estate, maybe. Mutual funds, maybe. Owning your own business, maybe. It all depends on who you are. But here's what I know, AC, is that most of us are not trained to become millionaires. Most of us we're trained to become broke. End of story. How do I know that? Your average savings rate, even though income is going down for the last 20 years, here's what I know. So is savings. The average savings rate for your generation is negative 1%, which means every time you get paid, you go further and further into debt. If that's true, then you need to socially construct a different definition of what you want your life to look like. Me, personally, I don't want my children changing my diapers when I get older, right? Someday someone's going to have to take care of me because I'm a little cranky. You know, I limp around, all this kind of stuff. Well, hey, Aria, if it's true that someone's going to have to take care of me, do I want it to be my kids? Or do I want to put aside the money so I can have a professional do that so my kids won't? Right? It's a question that we have to answer. And you have to answer the same question. Who do you want to take care of you? If artificial intelligence is true, I was going to say, when I invested in the market, I invest in things that are going to replace me. Because the way I look at it is, those who are super wealthy, their job is to generate profits. And if they can generate profits by developing new technology, new drugs, etc., I want to know what technology is going to replace us teachers. And I know no matter what I do, I'll never be smarter than Siri. I'll never be smarter than Alexa. I can connect dots. I can speak pretty well. But I'm not 100% accurate because I don't have a computer mind. I have a good mind, but not a computer mind. They have a computer mind. One day, as artificial intelligence gets smarter and smarter, and as the communication system gets smarter and smarter, it would be easy to take your most attractive teachers, right, and embed them in a holograph and go ahead and let Siri and Alexa and artificial intelligence answer the questions, direct the discussions, teach the class, than it would be for a human being, right? So I started saying, what's going to replace me? I said, NVIDIA. NVIDIA will replace me. So I invested in NVIDIA and made a fortune, right? Then I take a look at, I see all these people driving around in Uber and Lyft. I said, okay, they're paying a lot of money for those drivers, right? Because human resources is the #1 expenditure for any company. So what if you don't have to pay drivers anymore? How's that going to happen? Self-driving cars. So I go ahead and I start investing in who's doing self-driving cars, NVIDIA. And then I bought another company, one you've never heard of probably. Some of you might. I bought a company out of China. And don't get into the politics, because they want you to be smokescreened. If you're smokescreened to see enemies out of arbitrary distinctions, then what's going to happen is you're not going to go to China and invest. Are there political boundaries? Of course there are. But take a look at America. You think there's not political boundaries within the United States? There's as many political boundaries within the U.S. as there are with China. It's just a question of who's going to have the power and the legitimacy to assert their position. So I let all that stuff go. I don't have time to play with that. I want to know who's going to be profitable. So I buy a company called NIO, N-I-O. They have self-driving cars. They have a great design. They have artificial intelligence, and they're producing a lifestyle. So I say, okay, taxi cabs, do we really need drivers? No. Do we really need truck drivers? No. What's going to replace them? Self-driving vehicles, right? Who's the best self-driving vehicle company in the world? NIO. It's a very small company now, but it has everything that it needs. So I invest in the trend that is going to take us into the future. The next one I'm interested in is 5G, right? We're going from 4G to 5G. Your cars, these Internet of Things. Internet of Things technology is going to replace your human brain. Look, when you pull up over at Sunset Place to park, right, your car pretty soon will just talk to the meter and pay for you. And when it pays for you, it'll just pull straight directly out of your bank. You know what's beautiful about that? You don't have to be there. You don't have to be present. The problem is, for those of you who don't know it, this is how structures are related to each other. What happens is that 30% of the police budget is based upon speeding tickets and parking meters. If all of a sudden there's no speeding because you have artificial intelligence driving the car and you don't get revenue from the parking meters, a third of the police budget disappears. They've just been defunded all over the country, right? Now you have defunding, you have lower levels of revenue. So what's going to happen to policing? If the police can't hire who they need, what are they going to use? They're going to use artificial intelligence, right? They're going to use those cameras. And NVIDIA is creating a camera instead of taking a cross-sectional analysis of your behavior. They do a deep analysis, which is where they store everywhere you've been forever. So we take your digital spending on your debit card. We know where you are. We know what you're going to buy. The camera takes and creates a full description of you. Now we got a full, complete, accurate documentation of who you are, where you are, what you think, where you're going to go. We can predict it. It's called predictive marketing, right? That's where it's going. Watch this. Universal income is now becoming a topic of discussion. That is, what happens if humans get displaced? Now we know that a lot of jobs are going to be created, right? Because you have a new structure, there has to be adaptations, new jobs are going to be created. That's cool. That's fine. But a lot of jobs, there won't be enough jobs to replace all the people displaced. So universal basic income is where you pay everyone a certain amount every year, every month, $1,000, so that they can pursue their creative passions. Here's all I'm saying. 9/11 changed everything. 9/11 changed the political system. 9/11 changed and gave us the idea that safety is more important than privacy. And it's allowed us to open up these doors for artificial intelligence and the digital economy to keep track of your spending habits, your social habits, your personal habits, you know. And in the future, you're going to be the one that has to come up with the way in which you, you're right, Megan, where you're going to adapt. Here's all I'm saying. You got to pay attention. You got to pay attention to the structures and the system. Now, there's one other piece. There's one other piece to 9/11, right? We blamed it on terrorists. But in the 20 years following, there's been a lot of questions as to whether it was the terrorists that actually did it. Or was it some other type of act or actions that actually did it? You know, I'm not going to get into conspiracy theories, but there are a lot of conspiracies. And the one thing, look it up. All right, World Trade Center 1 fell at 9:50. World Trade Center 2 fell at 10:15. Some say it was a demolition because there was a straight zero gravity fall straight to the ground instead of sideways or whatever. The only two buildings to ever fall in world history from a jetliner hitting it was World Trade Center 1 and 2. But the question is, and you can go look it up for yourself, why did World Trade Center 7 fall? The one that was down the street around the block. Why did that one fall? It wasn't hit by a plane. It wasn't blown up. No building fell on top of it, yet and still it fell, right? So there are a lot of people out there that question even what really did happen. The assets, that is CIA agents, there are CIA agents who were told that it was going to happen to stay out of New York City because we know it's going to happen. Well, if we knew it was going to happen, then we're really looking at Pearl Harbor, because we know that there was going to be an attack on Pearl Harbor, but we just didn't know when. So then they say, well, there was going to be an attack on New York City. We just didn't know when. But if you lived at that time, when they came out with the press release and the president and all this kind of stuff, they said we didn't know. We had no idea. When there are other persons that said, oh, we full well knew. Then there are other people who say it's an inside job. You know, at the end of the day, here's what I know. I don't know. I wasn't there. There's never any evidence collected. For those of you who are in criminal justice, there's never any evidence that was collected to look at it as a crime scene. Well, that's definitional, right? That's a definitional issue. That's a political issue. Because if it was defined as a crime scene, right, you could have never taken any of that rubble away. You'd have had to investigate it all, right? But by defining it as a terrorist scene, you can take it all away. Now watch this. If it's a terrorist scene, there's 0 homicides. If it's a crime scene, it's 3,000 homicides, which changes our rate of crime nationwide. And it changes the way we allocate our resources to fight crime. Okay? So that definition had a huge impact. And a lot of people are saying, well, that political definition, what were we really getting rid of? That's what we want to know. All that, I wasn't there. I don't have the evidence. I can't say if it's an inside job. I don't know if it's a terrorist job. I know that was produced by the media. But here's all I know. 3,000 people died unnecessarily. I lost a couple friends in that era, in that tragedy. Then there were also, collateral damage. Think about the number of families that were destroyed. Think about the number of people who didn't have life insurance. Now all of a sudden they have kids and they have a spouse. Now they're devastated, right? Exactly. Megan, and that's what I'll talk about when I teach terrorism in October off of Inter-American campus. We're going to do organized crime, we're going to do terrorism in October, but the definition is critical. The definition of everything is critical. It's all definitional, right? Basic definition, what is it to be human? Is it biological? Is it social? Is it cultural? Because the definition we use is going to have an impact on every system that we have, right? Definitions and the social construction of definitions is really what defines human nature. It really defines our opportunity systems, and most importantly, this is me, it defines how we treat one another. At the end of the day, we treat one another based upon definitions, not based upon the person, right? One of the examples I use when I come into a live class, I come in, I do my thing, playing music and stuff like that, high fives, all this kind of stuff. Hey, what's up? We have a handshake that we do, everything. And I just ask a simple question, right? How many of you know me? No one does. And I say, you look at me, I'm a white male. Usually I'll have a tie or at least a button down. I don't dress like this when I go to class. And there's a PhD by my name. So people make a lot of assumptions about who I am. PhD, he's a white male. He got was educated at Ohio State University, all these things, and they make assumptions. And I tell them, you don't know anything about me. You're looking at the surface. You're making projections based upon the surface. But what you don't see is I was raised by a single mother in the inner city in Toledo, which is very much like Detroit. We call it South Detroit. And I was raised by an African-American woman named Mama Green because my mother couldn't do it on her own. We were poor. It was a very violent neighborhood. My home was extremely violent, right? And look at me. Polished, relatively, able to communicate across all barriers and boundaries. I have wealth, not a lot of wealth, but I have enough, right? You would never imagine I came from that situation, but I went to a private school. So I lived on the poor side of town, but I went to this private school. And we make the assumption that you know me? Man, there were times where when I was in class at school that I couldn't focus. And the reason was because I had just been beaten at home, right? When I talk about the terrorism that little kids experience, it's because I lived in terror. You want to fight an international war like that? Well, why don't you protect me? It wasn't until I got to school that I had those protections. So when I come into a classroom, the reason why I'm different than other teachers that you have is because when I come into a classroom, I bring with me all those experiences, all those people who helped me, all the rainbows in my clouds. I bring them with me. And when I look at you in real life, and I do this too with your text message and stuff like that, but when I look at you in real life, I don't know who's sitting behind the mask that you're wearing. I don't know if you're going home to a terroristic type of situation. I don't know if you're living in fear of your life on a daily basis. I don't know. I don't know if you came from poverty. I don't know if you're the first person in your family to graduate from college. I don't know any of that. but I know that most of us wear a mask, and I know sitting in that seat, if you're sitting behind a mask and you don't have the ability to give me your best, right, it's my job to help you deal with the mask so that you can give me your best, right? I don't define you as a student at all. I define you as a person who's sitting behind a mask who I'm going to try to find a way to help you find your greatness. That's what I'm here for, right? I'm here to help you think about things in a different way. I'm here to help you look at the environmental scanning. I'm here to take a look at events like 9/11 and put it into a broader context and actually critique what you're looking at. Because at the end of the day, what I know is that if we can find you, this is why the who am I, that wasn't because I was just trying to do something silly. We'll talk about it next week. The reason I did the who am I assignment is because no one asked you who you are. All we want you to do is take a multiple choice exam. That's all we want. Rather than saying, who are you? I want to know who are you and how can this class make you a better person? How can this class take you to that dream that you have, to enliven your vision? That's what I think, right? Yes. Yes, Jessica, she said, we all have different faces we show in different places. My guy in sociology, one of them, is Irving Goffman. And Irving Goffman says that all of life is performed on a stage. It's a dramaturgical approach to sociology. All of life is a drama. And he says that based upon that, it's always a lie. And the reason it's a lie is because the language that we use never can accurately represent what we're really thinking. Right? And since we can't accurately reflect what we're thinking, we're always trying to construct what's real, but we can never actually hit it perfectly. So, when we're on the front stage, we wear a formal mask. I don't. I'm wearing a t-shirt underneath the shirt. I should. People think I'm unprofessional. However, we wear a front stage mask, but when we're on the backstage and we put on a backstage mask, we become a whole different person. So what you're saying, Jessica, is absolutely correct. When you're with your friends, you're different than when you're with your family. When you're with your family, you're different than you are when you're in church. And you're different when you are at your party. And you're different than when you're in class. In other words, in each context, you become someone who is different. Megan, that's a great question. My goodness. All right. So the question she has is, so how do you know who you truly are if you're always changing based upon situations and environment? That's a great question, right? So we're always in the yeah, it is human nature, Jessica, absolutely. Here's the way I look at it. We like to think of ourselves as a fixed being. This is Sean. This is who I am, right? And as a fixed static being, we assume that we have a fixed self, right? This is who we are everywhere. I tend to look at us as a process, right? And God, I wish, if you go back and look at the Who Am I video, where I do the short one, not the long one, but the short Who Am I video, where I have the little diagrams, and then you have the institutions right here, and then the opportunity structure, small networks, small groups, you. Okay, if you take a look at that, what that means is that system is always acting upon you. So the system always creates your context. Bang. Right? And this is for you, Megan. The system always creates the context. However, you are always a process of becoming that person. You're always being socialized to see the world differently. Every time you interact with someone else, you become a different self. So you're always in process of adapting to the context. Here's what it means. The context is constructed at the macro level. And Jessica, this is human nature. We all adapt to macro structural things. Then the institutions shape us. I'm trying to figure out where the camera is. Then the opportunities shape us. Then our networks, and then our small groups, then our immediate people. So we're always in that context. But because who we interact with, definition of situation, always changes, we adapt to it. So here's what I strongly suggest, and I'm actually going through this process right now. We get stuck in our habits, our routines. And I'm a firm believer in ongoing self-assessment, ongoing introspection. How am I adapting? Am I being the best person I can be? Am I heading towards what I consider to be a great life? Or am I just accepting complacency and I'm just going to stay stagnant where I am? So our consciousness, Megan, our emotional self is tied to our relationships, and it's tied to our social location in the structure. So what does that mean? What that means are, oh God, I'm going to write this down for you, just for you, Megan. That means that we are, come on, Sean, put it in the chat box, homeboy. Okay. Structure-rated beings. Megan, we are what we call structure-rated beings, which means macro forces shape the context, but our interactive definitions allow us to behave. So we are macro, micro at the same time. Here's my suggestion. We're going to undergo the greatest change over the next 20 years in human history. Right? It's going to be lightning fast. It's happening faster than we can. Moore's law, right? Moore's law, which is how long does it take to double our ability to crunch data through computer technology, and what's the cost? At Moore's law, we're just plummeting. We can crunch more and more data at a smaller and smaller amount of cost. NVIDIA has created a technology through their microchip processors that can do 1 trillion calculations per second. Per second. I can't fathom what that means. But that's what gives cars the ability to drive by themselves. It's the fact that they can teach themselves, right? So, we're undergoing great change. Here's my suggestion for you, Megan. If you understand that you are a process and not a fixed entity, right? That means that you can allow yourself to adapt, to change, and critically assess. Continue to do inventories of who you are. But to do those inventories, you always want to take a look at what is the direction society is going in. Because the greatest gift I can give any of you, is the ability to read the trends and to put your who and to put your what, that is your skill set, into that trend. If you learn how to do that, you're not going to get run over by the institutions. If you don't, you're going to be dominated by the institutions. So as I head towards the horizon, I probably got 30 years left, who knows, maybe 50, maybe 2 minutes, who knows, right? My greatest goal at this point is to train people on how to put themselves in the horizon, how to put themselves into the trend and make adaptations so that you can be in control of your life and not have your life control you. That's my only goal now. Financial matters make a big difference. Placing yourself in the economic order. Megan, Jessica, AC, all of y'all. We have trained you to be followers. I want you in your lifetime to train yourself how to be an entrepreneur, how to own and control your own business. Because by 2040, 40% of you are going to have to own and control your own business because of the change in the labor market. And we are training you to be an employee, not an owner. So here's what I really want you to do. You all keep asking me about these assignments. Yeah, dang it. Send it to HopeWorks or put it inside Blackboard. That's fine. When are we getting it back? 2 weeks, maybe 3. Because I have 150 students, 210 students. I'll do my best. What's more important is not that. What's important is, what do you take from the course material that you can apply to your life? That's what's important. Man, at this point, you notice there are no multiple choice exams or quizzes. And the reason is because you've got to think for you. You can take it lightly and just skate by and get a good grade. Or you can take it as a life-changing event and take it seriously and take a look at what can I take from this class that's going to direct my life. 9/11 was critical because it shows you how ideology can shift. Well, capitalism is the best, assuming that we have capitalism, right? I'm not so sure we have a capitalist system. If we had a capitalist system back in 2008 when, let's look at it this way. General Motors, AIG, all those different classes, check it. Why did they get bailed out? A capitalist system would never bail out a corporation. Capitalist system would never bail out an individual. Why? Because the invisible hands of capitalism, the invisible hands of the economic system would let you die. If you can't survive on your own, why should we save you? Right? Let the most competitive, let the strongest and the fittest survive, not the ones who are unfit. And what we did in 2008 is we let the unfit live. Probably a good thing because so many people are employed by them, but that wasn't capitalism at all. So we say we have a capitalist enterprise, but we really had a capitalist enterprise when we invest in the people. You think, yeah, I think so, right? I'm not trying to get into all that stuff today, but look, they should have failed. Let's put it this way. Here's how I look at it, AC. Here's how I look at it. General Motors, AIG. Janine, we don't even know if we have a capitalist system. We don't know what we have, right? Now, okay, we can go with the Hobbes method, the Hobbes perspective, what have you. I don't know if we do or don't have capitalism. I don't know if we have a democratic system, right? Do we have an oligarchy? I don't know. I'm not equipped. Let's ask Richard Tapia, who's a political science professor over at Inter-American. He knows the answer to that stuff. I don't. Communism, we don't have that either. China's not communistic. Are you serious? How else are they going to generate the profits they do? They're one of the highest levels of capitalist enterprise there is, right? Because if capitalism is about generating profits and having private property seep into those who are most productive, then the Chinese are completely the most capitalist society. They just happen to have a political government that's communistic to control the direction of capitalism, but who says we don't? Who says we don't have a government that controls the direction in which our economic system goes, right? Because not everyone's going to become president or senator. Take a look at the distribution of where those people came from with their education level. Where they get their school? Ivy League schools? Are you serious? Yeah, well, I don't disagree with that either, Jessica. Look, here's all I'm saying. I don't know the answers. But I know the trends. And I can see what's happening just in front of me. Nothing is perfect. Nothing's imperfect. It's how we manage it. All right? But it doesn't matter to me whether we have a capitalist system or a socialist system or a communist system or anything. None of that matters to me. The only thing that matters to me is what happens to you. That's all I care about. I want to imagine I'm here 50 years from now. And I just wrote that chapter about my advisor. The day that, a week before he died, we sat down and we shared ice cream, and he told me that I was the best teacher he'd ever met, which was a great honor because he was the one that taught me everything. And I sat there and we talked and we exchanged, I love you, Len, Sean, I love you as my son, all that kind of stuff. And I wrote in my book last night that I'm writing. I'm writing another book called Hope Works. I hope you all get it. I'm not gonna lie about it. It's an optimistic book as opposed to the other ones that are very dark. But I had a perfect moment, right? A moment where I'm sitting with the person that changed my life, who literally saved my life. If it wasn't for him, I wouldn't be a professor now. Who knows what I'd have been, but I wouldn't have been a professor. Certainly wouldn't have written any books because I wasn't going to school to write. I was trying to take multiple choice exams. And I sit there and I look at him, and I know that without him, I'm not going back to Ohio State. Now, who knows where I'm going? I wouldn't be talking to you now if it wasn't for him, okay? So I look at him, and he looks at me, and he says, Sean, this is the last time we're going to see each other. I gave him a hug. He gave me a hug. I said, Len, thank you for everything you've done. He said, Sean, you're the type of student that makes teaching the job that we love, right? So I fast forward myself to Len, and I imagine seeing you in 10 years. I plan on being around for a while, but let's say I have a week left, and you and I are sitting on that bench, and you tell me, while we're eating ice cream or a snow cone, whatever, or we're at AC Icy's, chilling out over at the bay, and you say, you changed my life forever. And I said, I'll tell you, I'll never forget you because you were the type of student that made it worth me getting up every day and teach. That's a perfect moment, baby. We can get tied into the politics. We can get tied into that. We can get into these debates about culture and division and all that. But you know what? It is different. And socialism and communism are different. But really, to me, what is most important is that you have magical moments in your life, right? That you have these moments where they're so pure and they're so perfect that they're unforgettable. Because as I've aged, I can't remember what I did June 12th, 1985. Nope, I can't remember. But I can remember some great moments in 1985. And let me tell you what, you're gonna get older, and you're gonna realize your greatest memories are in moments. And all I want for you is to take events like 9/11, to take these structures and trends that are taking place, and find your best self, and put your best self out there. Know who you are, know what you want, know what your dream is, and construct a life for yourself where you can achieve that dream. By the way, and I'll talk about this again in class, if you have people on your team who bring you down, who deride you, who insult you, who question your being, who make you feel bad about yourself, you need to let them go. You need to let them go. And you need to construct yourself with a team of people who elevate you, who believe in you, who are going to lift you up when you fall down. And even when you fall down, they're not going to criticize, they're not going to blame you. They're going to allow you to put your head on their shoulder. Maybe they'll constructively criticize, but they are there for you. If you are going to make it to your dream, you need to construct a team of people around you who believe in you. And if you're in an abusive situation, you call me. I'll get you out of the abusive situation. I know everybody. I know all the police. I know all the attorneys. I know everybody. I'll get you out of it. Okay. If you're in a situation where you don't know where to turn, you call me. If you have suicidal ideation, you give me a call. I'll make sure that you have a reason to get up tomorrow morning. I'll do it. Right. I don't care if there's liability issues or not. Because at the end of the day, I've had in my career probably 25 people who are ready to commit suicide. In Miami-Dade College, I say in the last 5 years, I've had 10 or 15. What would I have been if I'd let them go, if I turned my head? I'd have been a nothing, right? So you need someone on your team, you call me. You call me. I'll be on your team. And I'll do what I can do. And if I can't do more, I won't. And I'll tell you I can't do more, but here's where you need to go. Because when it comes down to it, people, you are in school for one reason. And that is to find your greatness. And then to construct your team around you that will elevate you to become great. The second reason you're in college is so that you can learn the communication skills and mechanisms so that you can fit into that class of people, not class, but into that group of people, right, that will provide you with the resources that you need to build your dream. You do those two things, baby, you're going to live a life that other people around you will not. My goal is always to produce top 5%ers in income, in life opportunities, but most importantly, in quality of life. That is the happiness that you have. And what I do with 9/11 is I situate it in a way where I can understand where I am on any given day so I can become better than I was yesterday. And a lot of times I fail, but every day I try to become a better person. And right now I'm on this little trek to become something different than I was last week. And you all are part of the transformation. But you know what? Your change is coming. It's much greater than the change that I experienced in my lifetime. Just pay attention to the trends. Pay attention to who am I, who are you, and put yourself in the trends and be entrepreneurial. All right, hey, Aurea, Megan, all y'all, you're going to learn. I love y'all. Because at the end of the day, the students' school is my family. And we are going to take it to the next level. And all we're doing is using the class for that reason. What's sad, Janine? Well, thank you, y'all. Anyhow, I feel pumped. I'm going to go write another chapter. I hope you all like it. It's called Hope Works. It's coming out. It'll be done before the semester ends. And hopefully I can become a life coach. I am a life coach and a motivational speaker because that's where my ambitions are. That's where I should have been my whole life. But I'll tell you what, man. I love teaching. I hate grading. I love teaching. I hate grading. If I could do this all day, I would. Right? But thank you, Megan. But I can't do it. So I live within the system and I try to construct something different. ACA, look, you all. We didn't even have to have class today, right? This was impromptu. This is 9/11 stuff. But the fact that one moment in time can change history and destiny shows you how you have to be on preparation and be a critical thinker. That's all. And achieve your greatness. Make sure you remember what your dream is. Have a vision for what you want your life to look like. And build your team, baby. Build your team. And if you don't have the resources to build your team like I didn't, you lean on Len Jordan. You can lean on me. You can lean on whomever. Lean on them. That's our job. To hoist you up. Pick you up. Shine you off. Let you see yourself in a way that you never saw yourself before. We do that, boom. Life is good. And even in face of all this change with artificial intelligence and robotics, life is good, baby. You got to be the one in control, and you can do it. All right? Hey, Ashley, that's what I do. All right, everybody. I didn't expect to go an hour and 20 minutes, but you kept asking questions, and you fed into our discussion, and I got to tell you what, this was a blast. Who was the person that suggested that I do this live stream today? Who was that? Because your number is on my phone, but I don't know your name. But in any case, you all, it was fun. It was enjoyable. Certainly hope it was worth your time on a Friday afternoon. It was definitely worth mine. And there's more truth coming, as Simon Dennis used to say. He was my advisor at Ohio State. Again, just like Len Jordan. I wouldn't be here if it wasn't out him. He used to always say, more truth next time, right? So who was the person that asked me to do this today? Was it worth doing, you guys? Was it worth taking an hour and a half out of your Friday afternoon to have just a little discussion on 9/11, common sense, and the impact on our lives in historical context? Just curious. Oh, you're welcome. All right, everyone. All right. Thank you, Isabella. Raydell. Oh, I wasn't ready for all that, baby. Thanks, Raydell. All right, AC. Hey, you know what? When we get back to real class, when we actually live stream, please, this is how we participate. I wish that we could do, everybody face to face at the same time, but, I keep hearing liability issues, and thanks, AC, thanks. I keep hearing about, well, if they're visible, you got a liability if you see their name. Oh my God. So I don't do Zoom because it says liability. There's so many contextual things. I just said, you know what, live stream on YouTube. I get it. You get it. Let's just go ahead and go for it. One thing I want to do, and you all think about this because you're a lot more creative than I am. You understand social media better than I do. I want to figure out a way to make everything a lot more interactive. For example, it doesn't have to be like on a daily basis, but for example, I want to be able to celebrate our accomplishments. I want to be able to have moments where we say, man, that was unbelievable. For example, the one thing I'm going to miss this semester is every semester we have what is a Thanksgiving dinner. Every one of my classes we have Thanksgiving dinner on the week of Thanksgiving. Well, how are we going to do that? I want to have events like that along the way where we can actually create and maintain this family type environment. All right, you guys are doing this WhatsApp thing. I was told to get off WhatsApp by other faculty members. I was very disappointed in that because I like knowing what's going on so that I can address it. What do you mean, Jessica? I'll do the group chats. I mean, the group chats are for you. I wish I could get on. I might get on them later. Give me a couple weeks. I'd like to come back because I need to know what's happening. I don't know what you mean, Jessica. Send the phone number, Jessica. That's what Janine Valverde says. Send the phone number. All right, everyone. Well, I'm tired. Jessica wants to be in it. You all help her out. Anyhow, I'm going to log off here. I hope this was worth your time. I will see you next week during our live stream. And there's some phone numbers on there. I hope you've all copied them down. I'll give them a couple seconds to move forward. All right, everyone. Have a great weekend.